The CIA, masters of espionage? Sometimes. But also, unapologetic pioneers of the dumbest ideas taxpayer money could buy. From robotic cats to psychic warfare and condoms as psychological weapons. This isn't a thriller. It's a blooper reel with a security clearance. Let's unpack the Cold War's most absurd secret files. 1. During the Cold War, someone at the CIA looked at the global struggle against communism and thought, you know what this needs? A love potion. I'm not kidding. They tried to develop a sympathy pill, which, when ingested by an enemy soldier, would make him spontaneously fall in love with America. One minute he's a devoted Marxist, the next he's weeping at a bald eagle, craving a Big Mac, and trying to trade his rifle for a pair of blue jeans and tickets to a baseball game. This wasn't just an idea. This was a serious project. It's the kind of plan that could only be cooked up by someone who truly believed you could solve geopolitical conflict with the same logic as a Saturday morning cartoon. The project was ultimately scrapped, presumably after they realized the side effects might include an uncontrollable urge to deep fry everything. 2. In what might be the most gloriously juvenile act of psychological warfare ever conceived, the CIA planned to attack the Soviet Union's morale by going straight for the crotch. The plan was to airdrop thousands upon thousands of extra-large condoms all over the USSR. But here's the kicker, the real chef's kiss of idiocy. Each package would be clearly stamped, made in USA size medium. This was it. This was their masterstroke to crumble the Iron Curtain. Not through diplomacy, not through economic pressure, but by giving the entire male population of a rival superpower a complex. It's the international espionage equivalent of leaving a prank note on someone's car. You can just picture the KGB general's report. Comrades, they are attacking us with evidence of their robust masculinity. 3. The CIA once looked at a common house cat and saw the next James Bond. Their first attempt at feline espionage was breathtakingly simple-minded. They knew cats wandered into Soviet embassies, so they concocted a plan to leave food out for them, hoping one would just decide to stick around after its meal and eavesdrop for freedom. Newsflash. Cats don't work for anybody. They are furry little anarchists fueled by spite and gravity-defying naps. The cats would show up, devour the free chow provided by the American taxpayer, and then immediately wander off to do whatever the hell cats do. It was a multi-thousand-dollar intelligence operation defeated by the fundamental fact that you cannot bribe an animal whose primary motivation is knocking things off shelves. 4. Imagine you're a captured CIA agent. Things are looking grim, but you have an ace up your sleeve, or rather, somewhere way less comfortable. The agency actually developed a Rectal toolkit, a capsule full of tiny saws, drills, and other escape gadgets designed to be hidden in the one place they assumed enemy agents wouldn't want to check too thoroughly. Someone had to design this, someone had to approve it, and some poor agent had to be briefed on how to carry it. It's the ultimate workplace nightmare. Forget a 401k, your company-issued equipment requires a preparatory diet and a whole lot of personal courage. This wasn't just thinking outside the box, it was thinking way inside a very specific box. 5. The CIA's obsession with Fidel Castro was so intense, it bordered on a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. They tried over 600 ways to get him, but the most iconic has to be the exploding cigar. This wasn't just a gag cigar that gives you a little pop. This was a stogie packed with enough high explosives to launch his beard into a low Earth orbit. This was a real plan, drawn up by serious men in serious suits. You have to wonder what that brainstorming session was like. Poison milkshake? Too subtle? Exploding seashell? Getting warmer? A cigar that detonates with the force of a hand grenade? Johnson, you're getting a promotion. It was less of a covert operation and more of a homicidal practical joke. 6. When bribing cats with food failed, the CIA did what any sensible government agency would do. They threw millions of dollars and advanced surgical procedures at the problem. Enter Operation Acoustic Kitty, a project to create a cyborg spy cat. They paid a surgeon to implant a microphone, transmitter, and battery pack inside a living cat, turning it into a furry little listening post. After years of work, they took their multi-million-dollar feline agent out for its first field test. They released it from a van to go record a conversation, and it was immediately flattened by a taxi. 10 seconds. Years of research and a budget that could fund a small war, all ending in a sad little splat on a city street. It was, without a doubt, the most expensive and tragic traffic accident in espionage history. 7. Being followed by the KGB in Moscow was a real drag, so the CIA devised a getaway plan that was equal parts brilliant and utterly humiliating for the other guy. They invented a system called Jack in the Box, which was basically a high-tech, inflatable sex doll. An agent being tailed could pull over, and in seconds, a lifelike mannequin would inflate in the passenger seat. The agent would then sneak away, leaving the KGB to meticulously tail a blow-up doll for the next 5 hours. Imagine the KGB agent's report. Subject has been motionless for 3 hours, no signs of breathing. Suspect he may be full of air. It was an incredible feat of engineering, all to give their agents a chance to escape and to give the KGB a very embarrassing story they could never, ever tell anyone. 8. You would think after the Rectal toolkit, the CIA's R&D department would have explored other avenues. You would be wrong. They also developed a tiny tracking device that could be covertly inserted into a person's rectum to function as a homing beacon. It seems there was one guy in the CIA's tech division whose solution to every single problem was, I don't know, maybe we can stick it up their butt? It's like they had a whole department dedicated to violating the Geneva Convention in the most creative and personal ways possible. Fortunately, even for the Cold War CIA, this was a bridge too far, and the device was never used. It just goes to show that even the most powerful spy agency on Earth occasionally has a moment of clarity and says, you know what? Let's not do that. 9. In the world of espionage, secret signals are everything. But the CIA took this concept and ran it straight back to a children's summer camp with their Shoelace communication code. This was a real system where agents would tie their shoes in specific ways to send messages like, follow me, danger, or I have information. Imagine a tense situation in Cold War Berlin. An agent needs to signal that the drop point is compromised. Does he use a high-tech gadget? No. He has to bend down in the middle of a crowded street and spend 2 minutes wrestling his laces into the double loop knot of imminent peril. What if you prefer loafers? Are you just out of the spy game? It's a system so profoundly goofy, you have to assume at least one mission failed because an agent's shoelace simply came untied by accident. 10. Back to the Let's Get Castro department, which by this point must have had its own dedicated floor and a massive budget for ridiculous props. One of the more personal and frankly creepy ideas was the poison pen. This wasn't a pen that wrote in poison ink. It was a pen fitted with a hypodermic needle so fine you wouldn't even feel it. The plan was to have a Cuban double agent casually bump into Castro and give him a friendly jab. The best part? When the CIA presented this brilliant Bond villain weapon to their asset, he took one look at it and refused, calling the idea laughable. You know your plan is dumb when the guy you're paying to commit assassination tells you you're being ridiculous. The CIA got roasted by its own hire. 11. After the spectacular failures of bribing cats and building cyborg cats, you'd think the CIA would have given up on weaponizing animals. You would be wrong. They just switched species. Their next brilliant idea was to train ravens to drop listening devices onto the windowsills of target buildings. Because, you know, ravens are famous for their obedience and unwavering loyalty to the United States government. They spent a fortune trying to teach these notoriously clever, mischievous birds to be delivery drones. The project was another bust, likely because the ravens, upon being given a shiny, expensive bug, would immediately trade it to a squirrel for half a walnut, or just drop it on some random guy's head for laughs. The CIA was once again defeated by the simple fact that animals are not tiny, feathered employees. 12. The inflatable dummy was a good start, but the CIA decided they could make their agent escape systems even more complicated and absurd. Enter the Jack-in-the-Box escape kit for car trunks. This wasn't just a dummy, it was an elaborate, spring-loaded contraption. An agent hiding in the trunk could, in a matter of seconds, trigger a mechanism that would simultaneously pop the trunk open, push a lifelike mannequin up into a sitting position, and allow the real agent to roll out onto the street. It was a real-life magic trick. You have to wonder how many test runs went wrong. How many agents got accidentally launched into a ditch before they perfected it? It's the kind of over-engineered Rube Goldberg solution that only a government agency with way too much time and money could ever dream up. 13. For the spy on the go, a quick disguise is essential. The CIA's answer to this was the Instant Disguise Kit, which sounds cool until you learn what it actually was. A series of inflatable body parts. An agent could wear a special harness under their clothes and, using a small hand pump, inflate a fake gut, broader shoulders, or even a bigger backside to change their silhouette. Imagine trying to do this subtly while being chased down an alleyway. The frantic, squeaky sound of a hand pump, followed by a lopsided beer belly suddenly erupting from your shirt. What if you get a puncture? You just slowly, sadly deflate in the middle of a tense interrogation. It was a plan that was almost guaranteed to make you look less like a master of disguise and more like a malfunctioning parade float. 14. In one of the most ambitious and ultimately hilarious intelligence failures of all time, the CIA and British MI6 hatched Operation Gold, a plan to dig a massive tunnel from West Berlin into East Berlin to tap into Soviet military phone lines. It was an incredible feat of engineering, and they spent over a year digging in secret. The problem? The KGB knew about it before the first shovel even hit the dirt. A Soviet mole had told them everything. So for 11 months, the CIA listened in, thinking they were getting top-secret intelligence, while the Soviets were knowingly feeding them carefully selected, useless information. It was the espionage equivalent of letting your little brother eavesdrop on a conversation you're having with your parents about what to get him for his birthday. The CIA thought they were winning, but they were the butt of the longest-running joke in Berlin. 15. The CIA's obsession with animals eventually went full sci-fi. When real animals proved too unreliable, they decided to just build their own. This led to the creation of various animal-themed drones, including the legendary insectothopter. This was a tiny dragonfly-shaped drone designed for surveillance. It was a marvel of miniaturization for its time, but it had one tiny problem. It was powered by a miniature gas engine. So instead of a silent, stealthy insect, you had a tiny, furious lawnmower buzzing erratically through the air, probably crashing into walls and running out of fuel after 60 seconds. It was an idea so far ahead of its time that the technology to make it not stupid simply didn't exist yet. But that didn't stop them from trying to build a spy out of a glorified mosquito. 16. Hiding a listening device is all about subtlety. The CIA decided to take the opposite approach by building a listening device disguised as an entire tree stump and placing it in a forest near Moscow. This wasn't just a little bug hidden in a stump. The whole stump was the bug. It was powered by solar panels on top, which were cleverly designed to look like the natural top of a stump. The problem is, even the KGB can spot when a brand new, perfectly shaped, slightly shiny tree stump magically appears in the middle of their woods. They eventually found it, probably because it was the only piece of nature in a 10-mile radius that looked like it was designed in California. It was an impressive piece of tech, but as camouflage, it was about as subtle as a neon sign flashing, "Secret spy stuff here." 17. After learning the hard way that animals are basically furry little anarchists, the CIA boldly ventured into the one field of intelligence even more unreliable, talking to guys who claim to see the future. For 2 solid decades, Project Stargate poured millions of taxpayer dollars into funding psychic spies and remote viewers. These weren't just background checks. They were asking these mystics to find Soviet missile silos and locate kidnapped generals from a comfy chair in Maryland. You have to wonder what the briefings were like. Okay, Chad, put down the healing crystal. We need you to astrally project yourself into a secure bunker and tell us if you sense any enriched uranium. Unsurprisingly, the psychics were wrong about 80% of the time. A failure rate so spectacular, you could have gotten better intel by asking a magic 8-ball, which at least has the decency to occasionally say, "Ask again later." 18. In a plotline that feels like it was written by a 14-year-old who just discovered comic books, the CIA launched Project Artichoke, a very real program to determine if they could create a hypnotically controlled assassin. The goal was to use a horrifying smoothie of drugs, hypnosis, and psychological conditioning to create a real-life Manchurian candidate. They wanted a human weapon they could activate with a secret phrase, who would then carry out a mission and have their memory wiped clean. This wasn't science, it was weaponized B-movie logic. Imagine the catastrophic potential for error. What if the trigger word was something common, like moist or taxes? You'd have sleeper agents accidentally activating in bakeries and post offices across the country, creating absolute chaos. It was a terrifyingly dumb idea that sought to turn a human being into a remote-controlled appliance of death. 19. Having failed to defeat communism on the ground, the CIA decided to take the fight to a much larger, more nebulous enemy: the weather. With Project Popeye, their grand strategy for the Vietnam War was to simply make it rain more. A lot more. They flew planes over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, seeding the clouds with chemicals to induce heavy, prolonged monsoons, hoping to wash out the supply lines. This is the geopolitical equivalent of trying to fix a national economic crisis by wishing really hard. It's a level of hubris you have to respect, believing you can win a war not with strategy, but with inconvenient sogginess. The Viet Cong, who had been living in that jungle their entire lives, were probably less concerned and more just confused as to why the American invaders were so obsessed with making it drizzle. 20. When their brilliant rainmaking plan failed to produce a victory, the CIA logically moved on to the next phase: a government-funded haunting. With Operation Wandering Soul, they flew helicopters over the Vietnamese jungle at night, blasting incredibly creepy audio recordings of what were supposed to be the tortured ghosts of dead Viet Cong soldiers. The tapes were filled with eerie wails and messages from the spirit world, warning their living comrades to surrender or face eternal damnation. It was a psychological operation that relied on the enemy believing their dead friends had suddenly become extremely chatty. You have to wonder what battle-hardened guerrilla soldiers thought, listening to this low-budget horror movie soundtrack echo through the trees. It was less an act of war and more the most expensive and least effective ghost tour in human history. 21. The CIA's foray into the supernatural in Vietnam must have received glowing performance reviews because they decided to use the same playbook in the Philippines. To combat communist rebels, they decided to become the monster in a local legend. Agents started a whisper campaign that a mythical, blood-sucking vampire called the Asswang was stalking the very hills the rebels used as a hideout. To add a touch of horrifying authenticity, they would occasionally capture a rebel, puncture his neck with 2 holes, drain his body of all blood, and leave him on a trail for his friends to find. This is a level of commitment to a bit that is frankly terrifying. They didn't just tell a scary story, they became the scary story. It's the moment when an intelligence agency stops being spies and starts being the producers of a very high-stakes, interactive horror film. 22. In one of the most audacious and financially ruinous projects ever, the CIA decided it absolutely had to have a sunken Soviet nuclear submarine. To pull it off, they enlisted billionaire Howard Hughes to build a gargantuan ship, the Hughes Glomar Explorer, equipped with a secret giant underwater claw. The public was told it was for deep-sea mining, a cover story so flimsy it's amazing anyone bought it. After spending a fortune, they found the sub and actually managed to grab it with their giant claw. Then, as they were slowly lifting it from the ocean floor, the sub literally broke in half, and the most important part, the section with the nuclear missiles and codebooks, snapped off and fell right back into the abyss. It was the world's most expensive and heartbreaking game of claw machine, and it proved that sometimes, even with billions of dollars, the prize just slips away. 23. For an organization whose primary job is to be sneaky, the CIA has occasionally shown the subtlety of a marching band in a library. This was never more clear than when they caused a citywide bomb scare in Washington, D.C. during a simple training exercise. Agents were tasked with planting a fake bomb at a power station to test its security protocols. They were so bad at being inconspicuous that a regular security guard found their device, understandably believed it was a real bomb, and immediately called the police. This led to a massive, real-world emergency response, complete with evacuations and screaming headlines. The world's most elite spies, on a practice run, managed to fail so spectacularly they made the evening news. That security guard deserved a medal for being better at his job than they were at theirs. 24. Nothing captures the beautiful, unhinged paranoia of the Cold War better than the concept of the backpack nuke. Officially called the Man-Portable Atomic Demolition Munition, this was a small nuclear bomb designed to be carried by a single agent behind enemy lines. The mission was simple. Hike to a crucial target, set the timer, and then, well, there wasn't really an and then. This wasn't a weapon, it was a suggestion box for starting World War III. It was a device that combined the destructive power of the atom with the reliability of a single, probably very nervous human being. Imagine the pre-mission briefing. All right, Johnson, your job is to not trip. If you trip, we all die. Have a good trip. It was a suicidal, insane plan that thankfully never got used. 25. In the grand pantheon of terrible ideas, weaponizing the weather holds a special place. But even that wasn't enough for the CIA's mad scientists. They decided to aim higher, literally, by trying to weaponize lightning. This wasn't a metaphor. They launched a research project to see if they could control and direct lightning strikes, presumably to smite their enemies from the heavens like a budget version of Zeus. You have to imagine the research proposal for this one. Objective: to harness the raw, chaotic power of atmospheric plasma and turn it into a pointy stick we can aim at communists. It's the kind of project that sounds less like a government program and more like the origin story of a supervillain. The project, shockingly, failed, proving that even for the CIA, some forces of nature are best left to their own incredibly destructive devices. 26. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were like two kids in a sandbox. Except the sandbox was the entire planet, and the toys were thousands of nuclear weapons. In 1958, the US decided to see what would happen if they set off a nuke really, really high up in the atmosphere. The operations, codenamed Teak and Orange, involved detonating nuclear bombs at altitudes over 25 miles. The result? They created massive artificial auroras that were visible for thousands of miles, turning the night sky over Hawaii into a terrifying radioactive light show. It also completely knocked out radio communications across the entire Pacific Ocean. It was a scientific experiment that had the side effect of making a huge chunk of the planet deaf and blind, proving that the best way to understand a hornet's nest is to poke it with a nuclear stick. 27. The CIA understood that the battle for hearts and minds was crucial, but their methods were often less subtle influence and more blunt force propaganda. A prime example was their secret funding of anti-communist comic books in Latin America. These weren't your friendly neighborhood superhero stories. The comics portrayed communists as hideous, bloodthirsty monsters, and capitalist Americans as chiseled, freedom-loving heroes. It was a plan to fight complex political ideology with brightly colored panels and dramatic sound effects. Imagine being a kid in Guatemala, just wanting to read about superheroes, and instead, you get a lecture on the evils of collective farming featuring a villain named Captain Comrade. It was a bizarre, condescending, and ultimately hilarious attempt at cultural warfare. 28. Sometimes the CIA's motivations were less about national security and more about fruit. In 1954, they orchestrated a full-blown military coup to overthrow the democratically elected government of Guatemala. The reason? The Guatemalan president had started land reforms that threatened the massive, profitable holdings of the American-owned United Fruit Company. That's right. The CIA toppled a government not to stop the spread of communism, but to protect the profit margins of a company that sold bananas. It's one of the most brazenly corporate-driven foreign policy actions in history. It wasn't about ideology. It was about ensuring that Americans could continue to enjoy affordable fruit salads, even if it meant destabilizing an entire nation to do it. 29. As Cold War paranoia reached a fever pitch, the CIA became terrified that the Soviets might invade the United States through Alaska. Their brilliant solution was Operation Washtub, a plan to set up pre-armed, pre-trained, stay-behind resistance cells composed of local Alaskans. They imagined a network of rugged woodsmen and grizzled fishermen ready to wage a guerrilla war against the Red Army. There was just one tiny problem. When they actually tried to recruit people, almost nobody was interested. The locals, it turned out, were far too busy living their lives to sign up for a hypothetical suicide mission. The operation was a massive flop, proving that the only thing harder than fighting the Soviets was convincing a guy from Anchorage to interrupt his fishing season. 30. In the high-stakes game of aerial reconnaissance, losing a drone is bad. Losing a top-secret, highly advanced drone to your primary adversary is a catastrophic, face-palmingly stupid disaster. The CIA's D-21 was a Mach 3+ drone, one of the most advanced pieces of tech on the planet. During a spy mission over China, one of them malfunctioned and simply crash-landed in the Chinese countryside. They didn't just lose a piece of equipment. They gift-wrapped their most advanced aerospace technology and handed it directly to their rivals. It's the espionage equivalent of writing down all your passwords, attaching them to a brick, and then accidentally throwing that brick through the window of a hacker convention. It was a self-inflicted wound of monumental proportions. 31. The CIA's animal kingdom of spies wasn't limited to land mammals and birds. They also took their talents to the sea by trying to militarize dolphins. Through Project Oxygas, they trained bottlenose dolphins to attach explosives to enemy ships. It sounds cool in a 1960s TV show kind of way, but they ran into a significant logistical hurdle. Dolphins are very intelligent, but they are not particularly nationalistic. They couldn't reliably teach the dolphins to distinguish between Soviet ships and American ships. You can just imagine the terror in the project manager's eyes as their multi-million-dollar aquatic assassin started cheerfully swimming towards a U.S. aircraft carrier with a live mine. The project was eventually scrapped, chalking up another victory for the animal kingdom's ongoing war against being employed. 32. The CIA has a long and complicated history of backing unsavory characters, only to have it blow up in their face. A prime example is Jean-Badel Bokassa, the brutal and cartoonishly evil emperor of the Central African Republic. After supporting his rise to power, the CIA watched in horror as he became increasingly unhinged, declaring himself emperor in a ceremony that cost a third of his country's annual budget and, according to widespread rumors, occasionally eating his political opponents. He went from being their guy to a full-blown cannibalistic Bond villain. The CIA was eventually forced to orchestrate another coup, Operation Barracuda, just to get rid of the monster they had helped create. It was a masterclass in reaping what you sow, if what you sowed was a violent, diamond-encrusted dictator. 33. In the 1980s, the CIA gave thousands of state-of-the-art shoulder-fired Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to help them fight the Soviets. And it worked. The problem came after the Soviets left. The CIA suddenly realized they had just armed thousands of loosely affiliated militants with some of the most effective anti-aircraft weapons on the planet. This led to the comical and deeply ironic situation where the agency had to launch a massive, multi-million-dollar buyback program to try and get their own weapons back. For years, CIA agents were running around Afghanistan with briefcases full of cash, trying to buy missiles from the very people they had given them to for free. It was the ultimate oh crap moment in foreign policy history. Turns out, the world's top spy agency spent decades proving that bad ideas, plus big budgets. Historic weirdness. So what's scarier, spies hiding in the shadows or idiots hiding in plain sight? Let the comment war begin. And if you want more real-life spy fails and historical madness, hit that like and subscribe button. You've been warned.